Welcome to Let's Talk Automotive, and in this week's segment on how things work, we are looking at air conditioning systems in your car. Let's kick off by giving as simple as possible explanation of the science behind air conditioning. So there are four main principles at work: evaporation, condensation, compression, and expansion. So evaporation removes heat. Our bodies, for example, cool down by first sweating, and as the sweat evaporates, it cools down, which in turn cools us down. We can show this more clearly by evaporating some gas and see how it chills the surrounding area. Condensation occurs when there is a physical change in the state of gas into a liquid. Compression causes heat, which is what we need to convert a gas into a liquid. You'll notice whenever you pump air, for example, the pump starts to get quite hot. This is due to the molecules pressing together. So we keep compressing until we get a liquid. And finally, expansion of the fluid that passes through the system causes it to change its state back to a gas. So we keep repeating the process to create a continuous supply of cool air. Now let's look at the principles in action. The compressor pumps the refrigerant vapor under pressure into the condenser. So when you press the aircon button on your car, it's the compressor that you feel starting, as it's usually connected via a belt to your engine's crankshaft. The condenser is located just in front of your radiator, and in fact most people confuse it with being the radiator. This is where the high pressure refrigerant vapor changes its state into a liquid as it's being pumped in by the compressor. This process generates a lot of heat, which is dissipated from the condenser by the airflow that is generated either by the fan or at high speeds simply by the airflow entering the engine bay. The refrigerant, which is still in liquid form, passes through a dryer, otherwise known as an accumulator, to remove any moisture. This is critical as any ice crystals that form because of moisture causes blockages and damage, in addition to it forming acid, which causes severe damage to the compressor and other components in the system. From the dryer, the refrigerant flows to the expansion valve. Remember, as we said, that evaporation causes cooling. So now the expansion valve depressurizes the liquid refrigerant, which changes its state into a gas when entering the evaporator. The expansion valve is quite literally the unsung hero in this whole process. The evaporator is mounted inside the passenger compartment behind the dashboard, and it provides cooling in two ways. Firstly, as the refrigerant flows from the evaporator, the refrigerant vaporizes and absorbs heat from the cabin. And secondly, the blower fan pushes air across the chilly surface area of the fins on the evaporator into the cabin. This also causes the moisture in the air surrounding the evaporator to condense, which is collected and drained out the bottom of the car, which you sometimes see as a puddle of water underneath your parked car. And the cycle continues as the compressor sucks the low pressure refrigerant vapor from the evaporator and pumps it back into the condenser. So that's a brief explanation of the workings of an air conditioning system. Now let's have a look at the different types of air conditioners we find in our cars. So we either have a manual or automatic system, with the automatic systems sometimes also known as climate control. With a manual air conditioning system, the temperature coming through the fans is consistent. That is, if you set the temperature to say 18 degrees, the air pumped through the vent stays at 18 degrees. The same is true for the fan speed. It remains fixed at whatever speed you set it to. Now the trouble with this is that we are constantly having to make manual interventions to adjust the temperature, which, unless you're Goldilocks, is either too hot or too cold, especially if you have your better half in the car. However, with an automatic air conditioning system, the temperature of airflow through the vents varies so that the cabin temperature we set remains constant. There is a safety element to having an automatic air conditioner. The body operates best at a temperature of 22 degrees, so constantly having to adjust the aircon system to regulate our core temperature causes fatigue. So by keeping the cabin temperature at a constant 22 degrees with an automatic system actually keeps us alert for longer while we're driving. But we can also have multiple temperature zones in the cabin which can be set at different temperatures, which literally means we can keep everyone happy in the car. Okay, at least from a temperature point of view. Now let's talk about some frequently asked questions. So for example, will I save fuel if I turn my air conditioning off? And the answer is both yes and no. Yes, if you're traveling at under 100 kilometers an hour, but any faster and the additional drag created by the open windows exceeds the amount of additional fuel you would use to run the air conditioner. Can I use any refrigerant to fill my system? The answer is an absolute no. Different systems use different refrigerant. Cars built before 1994 will probably have R12 refrigerant, but as we all know, that caused the ozone layer to be destroyed and was banned in new cars. So post 1994, the R134A refrigerant was used and is found in most cars today. However, by today's environmental standards, R134A is also considered to be a poor solution, as it still contributes to greenhouse gases. So now we have an even better solution. R1234YF, yes, R1234YF, which breaks down much faster than older refrigerants and therefore contributes even less to global warming. Why does my aircon smell when I turn it on? Most of the time, it's due to mildew or mold. So over time, bacteria, fungi, microorganisms can grow in the system where moisture typically collects, especially on the evaporator. Ugh. You can sometimes get rid of the problem by using an antibacterial treatment found at most auto spare shops, and check if your drain tube is not blocked. Also, run the fan for a while without the aircon turned on, which will evaporate moisture which is built up on your coils. To prevent a buildup of bacteria, try not to use the aircon at maximum for too long, as this creates an excessive amount of water. Also have a look at your cabin filter, as not only does it also suffer from a buildup of bacteria, but a dirty filter will also impede the flow of air through the vents. So that's all we have time for in today's episode of How Things Work, and I'm sure you'll be looking at your air conditioner in a whole new light. And until next time, cheers from the Let's Talk Automotive team.